Tonight I want to talk about a topic that I'll entitle Quantum Healing, subtitled The Role of Our Thoughts and Emotions in Health and Disease. And on the surface, this may sound kind of like a woo-woo topic, but it's actually very solidly validated by science, specifically neurology and a field of study called psychoneuroimmunology, as well as neuroendocrinology. And what those different fields do is teach us and show us through science how the nervous system is integrated with all systems of our body. And the nervous system, functions from a physiologic standpoint that we're used to and can easily scientifically validate, but then it also functions from a quantum level, which is also scientifically validated, but many people aren't either very knowledgeable in quantum physics or are confused by it. Some good lay person mainstream videos to watch, one specifically is called What the Bleep Do We Know? That was from like 2003, 2004. The science has progressed since then, but it's kind of a fun video to watch to pick up on some of this. But quantum healing, I've been interested in quantum physics for a while because it helps explain things that Newtonian physics doesn't explain. We've all had the experience of having a gut feeling that something happened to someone we know that isn't in the same room with us, and we call them up and they were just in a car crash or something like that. Or we're in business and we have a client that we haven't seen in a long time or thought about, and then we think about them, and within the day or two they call and get on your schedule or call and reconnect. And so these are quantum phenomena where the principles in those scenarios are entrainment and non-locality. So entrainment is basically, from a quantum physics standpoint, anyone we've ever met, we have a connection with. And the closer we are in relationship with them, the stronger that entrainment or the stronger that connection. So if something happens to that person, we're impacted as well. And it's non-local, meaning you don't have to be with that person. And the studies on this are really cool, but it's gone from studying two atoms that are spinning the same direction, miles and miles apart, and they change the direction of one atom, and simultaneously the other atom miles and miles away changes its spin. So it started at a quantum level of research and has grown to the human level, where they study people who are meditating and getting into a state of coherence in their heart magnetic field. And when you do that on a grand scale, they found that impacts outcomes in the economy, outcomes in violence, outcomes in all sorts of things. So basically, there's people all over the world that meditate. They've come together and set a date and said, on this date at this time, we're going to do this meditation with a goal of heart coherence, which is basically vibrating at the same frequency in your heart electromagnetic field as everyone else. And when you do that, that frequency impacts the planet. And it's happened a couple of times where they've studied it, and on those given days, there's less violence or economic stimulus or those sorts of things. So it's pretty wild. So bear with me in today's video. I'm definitely not an expert in this, but I'm excited about it because I'm reading more about it, I'm learning more about it, and it applies to what we're doing clinically in your individual case. And it applies in your life if you are dissatisfied with your current life right now in any way, because the science of quantum physics allows us to be in control of our lives, consciously or unconsciously, and change our lives if we want to. So every day we get to make this choice. We get to wake up and we get to say, oh, bleep, another day at the job I hate with the people I don't like, doing the same routine. or we can wake up and choose to be positive and happy and create our day. Either choice, right? It's our choice. We get to make it, but either choice has consequences. And those consequences can be health or disease, happiness or sadness, poverty or abundance, all of those things. So today I want to talk about, the science of how that happens. So we get to make this choice. And in making that choice, we're going to determine whether our past creates our future or whether we create a new future and leave our past behind. And this is on an individual level. It could be from a happiness standpoint, from a health standpoint, whatever we're talking about. So the choice you make here creates your reality for that day and for the future. How? Well, choices are made by mind, and our minds run our body. And in order to do that, we have thoughts, right? And thoughts trigger neurochemistry. So in our brains, we have neurons, and the neurons are all connected, more or less, depending on the certain pathways we're firing. And so when we have a thought that I want to pick up my coffee cup, or I hate my job, or I want to heal, whatever the thought is, we have a thought. From that thought, we're firing neurons. When we fire neurons, neurochemistry happens. They communicate using neurotransmitters and hormones and neurosteroids and different things like that. Part of the effect of the neurochemistry is an emotion occurs. So when we have a thought or an experience, neurochemistry happens. The neurochemistry results in an emotion. That emotion is tied to that experience, and that becomes a memory. If we do that over and over, that memory becomes a pathway and a habit. And through neuroplasticity, that pathway becomes stronger. So neurons that fire together, wire together. And the more neurons you have wired together in a certain pathway, the stronger that pathway or that habit is. I kind of picture driving over a grass field, a virgin grass field. And I mentioned this in my book when I'm talking about gut neuroplasticity. But imagine a virgin grass field. If you drive a tractor over that field one time, you're going to bend some grass. But by the end of the day and the next day, for sure, no one's going to know where you drove probably. But if you drive over that same path day in and day out, not only are you going to bend grass, eventually you're going to wear away the grass, and there's going to be obvious ruts there. And anyone could walk up and say, well, look, you've been here before, and you do it repeatedly. In the same way, if I want to change the path that I drive through that field, the first day I drive a different path, again, I've bent some grass, but there's no ruts formed. I have to change repeatedly and drive over that new path to develop ruts in that path and let the previous ruts grow over with grass again. So this is happening from a neuroplastic perspective as well. Whether we're doing good things or bad things, okay? If I have negative thoughts, it's easier for me to be negative the longer I'm negative, right? Because the ruts get deeper. Neurons that fire together, wire together. If I want to be positive, it's easier to be positive the longer that I'm positive, right? And the more consistently that I'm positive. If I want to get better at a sport, at throwing a ball, the first time my dad taught me to throw a ball was probably awkward and weird. But the more I practice, the better I become at throwing the ball, assuming I'm practicing correctly, right? So not only do you have neuroplasticity, but you develop muscle memory and incorporate the whole body, okay? So this repetition can be working for us or against us. Excuse me. I talked about psychoneuroimmunology and neuroendocrinology. Our thoughts, our neurochemistry become us, not just our mind and our personality and our habits, but also our health. Because if we go back to the emotion part, we've talked about before how emotionally charged experiences are the ones that are most impactful and most well remembered. Well, the reason for that is because the neurochemistry and the emotion are stronger, and the memory of it is stronger, so we replay that memory more, developing more plasticity along that pathway. So the more that we remember a given event, whether it's positive or negative, the more we're living in the past, and the more that past is creating our future. And the hormones and chemistry related to the emotion impact our genetics via epigenetic impacts. So we've talked on previous calls how we can't change our genes, but we can change our genetic expression. And one saying that I like is genetics load the gun, environment pulls the trigger. So we all have a certain gene makeup, and that's the loaded gun. But whether or not that gun is fired, you need someone to pull the trigger, right? The environment chooses that. An example would be there are hundreds of thousands of women in the United States that have the BRCA1 gene or the breast cancer gene. And if breast cancer were truly genetic, every woman with that gene would develop breast cancer in their lifetime. That's not what we see. What we see is some do, some don't. So the actual expression of that gene is what leads to breast cancer, and whether or not that gene is expressed is determined by the environment and lifestyle that an individual woman is exposed to and lives. Same idea with all of our genes. So that control is called epigenetic control, environmental lifestyle control. In my book, I talk about a nerd term called the exposome. And the exposome is a science term for all of the exposures we've ever had from conception forward, because all of our exposures potentially matter in our health via their impact on genetic expression or their epigenetic impact. So let's get into a hypothetical case. Okay, so let's call this a standard American male. And unfortunately, we're laughing maybe, but it's not far from the truth if we look at the numbers that say 2/3 of Americans are overweight or obese, right? So this person, and I'm making this up, okay, I'm not stereotyping. There are, actually the science shows there are plenty of people who visually are obese, but metabolically they're healthier than skinny people. So you can't judge a book by its cover, but let's go with this right now and say this person is as unhealthy as we all judge him to be when we first see that picture. And his actions would reinforce that, right? He's got a tall glass of either Coke or wine. He's got what looks like a fast food gluten-filled burger. He's obviously missed his mouth a couple times. He's overweight, obese, which means metabolically he's likely to have high blood pressure, blood sugar dysfunction, systemic inflammation, probably doesn't feel well, doesn't look like he's physically active, and all of that can result in anxiety and depression through various mechanisms. So if this person is that way, then he probably wakes up each morning not feeling well. He probably wakes up, goes to the bathroom, goes to the shower, makes his breakfast, goes to the same job, is in some pain, maybe anxious or depressed, comes home and does it all over the next day. Well, if we talked about our thoughts become a neurochemistry becomes emotion, emotions become memory, and the more we live that memory, the stronger that memory is, and the more that memory and that pathway impact our chemistry and our epigenetics, then we are literally, or this person is literally, his future is his past, or his past is his future, because he's doing the same thing over and over again. Einstein defined insanity as doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. If our goal is to be happy and we're sad, or to be healthy and we're sick, then doing the same thing that got us sick or got us sad is not going to make us happy or healthy, right? We need to change. We need to change our thoughts, which then change our neurochemistry, which then change our emotions, which, when emotionally charged and repeated, changes our memory and our physiologic pathways and our habits, and over time changes us through the psychoneuroimmunology and neuroendocrinology impacts and epigenetic impacts. And so as I'm reading this and learning this, I'm like, this is what we're doing in your individual action plans, right? A lot of times you start your action plan and you're saying, wow, this is really uncomfortable. I don't like this, and I don't like you, Doc. I miss the old way that I used to eat. I miss not exercising. I miss whatever, right? Well, that discomfort is good because you're changing your habits, and it's a new stimulus to your brain. It's new thoughts, new neurochemistry, new emotions and pathways. And if you stick to it and you're consistent with it, then you're creating a new you, right? Everyone wants to say the nutrition was the big thing or the supplement was the big thing. It's always a combination of things, but most people don't credit the cycle of just consistency, right? The nutrition and the supplements are key, but consistently implementing the right choices and then consistently feeling better creates that cycle of different neurochemistry and different emotions, creating a different you. So we get to choose whether we're healthy or sick. We get to choose whether we're happy or sad. And we get to literally create a new life based on our thoughts and our habits and what we do consistently. And I thought this picture was appropriate because, you know, our society and probably our human default is or maybe our cultural default is to say things are impossible, we have limits, etc. But really, things are possible. Anything's possible. The only limit is what your mind sets, right? Another way to look at this is I'm possible. So if we remove that X and make it I'm possible, whatever I'm you want to be, whatever I you want to be is possible if you allow it to be. And allowing it to be is to not set limits on yourself. And that's the hard part, because all of us live our past on some level, right? To live our future requires breaking our habits, and that requires constant seeking out of new experiences and new habits. So there's a cool book that I'll reference in a minute, but the key is that we need a new mindset to get new results. Everyone here is working with me because at some level you were tired of what the conventional medical model did for you or didn't do for you, or you were tired of living the way you were living and how it made you feel. And so you wanted to feel different and feel better. You maybe wanted to look different, look better, but overall you wanted a better life than what you had. And you knew unless you did something new, you were going to keep getting what you had gotten. You were going to live an insane life. So instead of going insane, you chose to create a new you. And that's what the new mindset did for you. That's how thoughts become things. At some point in the past, you said, I need to do something different. That thought has become the new you as you followed that thought forward into a consultation, into sitting down, into committing to an action plan and consistently implementing. And the results you're getting are the tangible physical manifestation of the thought you had in the past of, I can be better, I want to be better, I'm going to be better. So if you want to learn more about this, Dr. Joe Dispenza is the guy to read. Becoming Supernatural is his most recent book, and it goes in depth on what I've talked about here. He also has a book called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. He has multiple other books, but just jump into this one because this is his newest, so it's going to combine the info from all those others. But if you want to learn more about doing the work to change you, not just from the physical point that you're doing in the physiological point, but if you want to do it from the mental, emotional, spiritual point, this book is awesome. So I highly recommend it, and I'll open it up for questions. Janine, I know you have something.
Yes, I do. Actually, I could talk about this for a long time, but I used to teach a class on negative self-talk. And to demonstrate what our negative self-talk does to us, I would bring a person up in front of the class and I would use kinesiology on them. So I would have them hold their arm up to the side and I would ask them to tell me their name, and then I would press down on their arm and their arm would say, "Stay strong." Then I would have them say a positive thought to themselves, not to the group, but to themselves. And then I would press down on their arm, they held strong. Then I have them reverse the thought and do a negative thought. I pressed down on their arm and their arm went immediately down. So all of our negative thoughts really work against us. And we don't realize how many negative thoughts we're saying to ourselves on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that I tell my clients is, if I talk to you the way you talk to yourself, I wouldn't be a friend or in your life anymore. So why are you doing it to yourself?
And they definitely wouldn't give you money.
No, they wouldn't pay me for sure. They'd run as fast as they could.
There's a good book. There's a good book on the kinesiology and what you're talking about. The power of words is called Power versus Force. Have you read that one?
I have. It's good.
Okay. Yeah. So that's another one for the library. What else?
This is so fascinating. I love this kind of stuff. Thanks so much for bringing this up and teaching us so much. It was occurring to me just even recently, like, again, that Cora doesn't, like, she's never known herself without this rash that we're, working on. That's her symptom. And how much, is like a rut in her brain that, like, this is part of who she is, because she's 8, but it started when she was 2.5,
Yeah.
And then the other, just like last night at dinner, Cora was fine, but then another daughter got suddenly itchy on her little place that sometimes gets a rash. And all of a sudden Cora like freaked out and she like went into her itchy spasm. And I was like, interesting. Yes. Yes, my other daughter is agreeing with me. But I'm curious to like what the role of forgiveness in this kind of thing.
Yeah. It's huge. Absolutely huge. And, parallel to that would be self-acceptance.
Yeah.
So if you read Becoming Supernatural, if you read the book I just referenced, in chapter 1, he gives a story of a woman who was married, had 2 kids, had a happy life. And one day her husband jumped off the tallest building in their city without saying goodbye, and obviously passed away. And so for years, he didn't say bye to her. He kissed the kids goodbye, and that was it. And so for years, she obviously had the, innumerable emotions tied to that. Like, why wouldn't he say bye to me? Blah, blah, blah. Why'd he do this? Why'd he leave me with all this debt and these kids? We could say emotions all night and not hit them all. Right. And so and this woman was a psychologist. So she understands, like, even though she's living these thoughts, they're not benefiting her, but emotions are stronger than logic. Okay. So it took her years of this to completely break her down psychologically and physically and all this before she finally, you know, met what's called that dark night of the soul, where she finally just gave up and said, you know, I surrender, essentially. And once she did that, she said within days, a friend of hers had invited her to a talk with Dr. Dispenza, and she went there and he did his you know, his teaching, and she was like, this is it. And essentially she totally brought herself out of all of that. And the key was surrendering, accepting where she's at, you know, forgiving the husband for whatever and whatever else needed to be done, and then choosing to not relive that past every single day, but create a new past, or a new future, sorry, and a new mind. So not be a slave to those thoughts anymore, but intentionally create the future she wanted. And now she actually, you know, she's teaching she's a facilitator of his classes all over the place. So all that to say, you know, forgiveness, acceptance, the psychological, mental, spiritual aspect of it is massive. And that's the part that's kind of brushed under the rug in our society, because we have a very materialistic culture. So, you know, if I can point to it and create a physiologic pathway, or point to a pathway to blame, then we can create a medication to block that pathway and take care of it. But, you know, that woman was on psychiatric medication for years. She was a psychologist herself, and that stuff wasn't helping her. So yes. Probably.
I'd like to add one more thing to the whole mix. I was reading a book several years ago by Brian Tracy, and he was talking about a young man who had come to see him who had really, really bad acne. So he wanted to know, what can I do about this? Because it was definitely in his mind and his negative thoughts and all that kind of stuff. So Tracy recommended that for 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the evening, he goes and pounds nails into a board. And he said, come back and see me at the end of 2 weeks, which he did, and his acne was gone. So he, you know, so if we're carrying things that are from the past that we're angry about or upset about or whatever, don't hesitate to get a board and pound it.
Yeah. There's a thank you, Janine. That reminded me of another book by a medical doctor, psychiatrist with 40 years experience. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. And he basically deals with trauma patients and emotional trauma patients, so abuse of all kinds. And he is a psychiatrist, so he can prescribe all the meds he wants, but he tries not to do that at all. He uses, you know, exercise and yoga and theater and neurofeedback and all these different modalities to help people. And what he says is basically the trauma disconnects our brains from our bodies, right? If I'm being raped and I'm a 7-year-old and I can't do anything about it, then I'm going to disassociate with my body when that's happening, because, you know, just to get away, right? And so that disassociation becomes, especially with repeated traumas, that's the new normal, right? And so a lot of people with trauma history aren't good with the physical body. Like they have sensory issues, they have balance issues, they have coordination issues. They've just left their body. So his goal is to establish with a person, like, how do they need to be rehabilitated to bring their senses and their body and their mind back together. And so you're not, again, going to do that with Prozac. You need to actually feel or exert against the board or that sort of thing. So absolutely, you know, if you look at all of this stuff, whether you're looking at Dr. Dispenza's book or you're looking at what we're all doing together, or you look at that doctor's got like a Swedish last name, so I'm not even going to try, but you look at his strategies, they all take work and accountability. And, you know, our culture is anti-accountability, right? We want to be victims. We want it to be genetics. I can't do anything about it. It's not my fault. Just give me a pill to palliate me till I die, right? And that you live a crappy, boring, painful life and you die. And then the people who are actually seeking to reach their potential and always learn more and are accountable, typically they tend to be healthier and look like how we all should look, and those people want to look but haven't been taught to put the work into to get there, right? So the answer is not in the pill. The answer on some level is we all need to be accountable for something, and that could be, Janelle, just being accountable to doing the work to accept myself as I am, or forgive whoever for what they did and move on.
Yeah, I tend to if I wake up in the night, my mind goes and I either try to convince somebody or of something, like, and it's kind of like the same rut, like over and over again. And then, I mean, they're not even here, or I like, craft my case or whatever. It's so ridiculous. It sounds so ridiculous during the daytime, but at night it's like this all important thing, or I guess like replaying maybe my case against other people too. And God is graciously reminding me about forgiveness and like letting it go, and that only He can bear the weight of other people's sin, like I can't even bear my own. I needed Jesus. So but and I'm just realizing, like, the more I hold on to that, the more it's just poisoning me. Like, it really doesn't have much effect on them.
Right.
And I know that's so simple. Everybody knows that, but it still is hard to like make that leap into like actually letting go.
Mm-hmm. But that leap is where everything you want is. Right. I would imagine. I would bet.
Yeah.
So.
Good. Yeah, because years ago, I had a client and she came to see me and she was talking about how she got fired from her job. And she was going into excruciating detail. And she really had all these anger thoughts against her boss, her previous boss. And I said, how long ago was this? And she said, well, I got let go 4 years ago. And I was like, 4 years ago? But there she was 4 years later, as if it happened yesterday. So sometimes you just have to write it out or do whatever you need to do and let it go. Because the boss wasn't thinking about her, but she was consumed by all that herself. So Janelle, if you can, because it's about you, it's not about whatever happened or whoever it was with or whatever.
And Janelle, would you consider yourself, because I do, would you consider yourself a highly sensitive person?
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
I am too, and I birthed a highly sensitive daughter, and there's a great book out called Highly Sensitive Child, which I got because I was trying to figure out how to deal with being a new parent of a highly sensitive child. But then recently I've had some issues and I thought, why didn't I put that care into me? And so the author also wrote, and I think she wrote first, highly sensitive person. And I'm starting to reread that and thinking, oh gosh, it's hard to get out of the rut when you're a highly sensitive person, and I consider myself born that way, when you are also not only dealing with your own stuff, you're absorbing other people around you and other situations. So now you've got all that too. And man, my grass is so pressed down that I'm having a hard time even with the affirmations, because what's happening in the affirmations is that you'll say an affirmation. Let's just say you want to be wealthy or something, and you say, I am wealthy. Well, your grass is so pressed down that as soon as you release that, your mind is playing, you don't believe that. You're not wealthy. You're not, and so it almost kind of counteracts. That's what I'm having a hard time with. It's like it almost, because you're used to playing that, your needle is stuck in that groove of that record, and you are trying to get to the next note. And by you saying something opposite, it only reminds you of you're not that. And so that's really where I'm kind of stuck,
So
and then
Karen,
at night it's the replay.
So Karen, one key is to remember that you have to say it with emotion.
Right.
It's not just I am wealthy. Right? It's like you have the hammer, and every time you pound the board you're saying it, and you're pounding as hard as you can. Right? Or you're emotionally charged, because you're not going to unwire those pathways or create new ruts if you're just like, I'm wealthy, but you're more committed into saying, no, you're not.
Right.
Right. Or you're more emotionally, you have so many more reps at saying, no, I'm not. Right. So you have to emotionally scream from the mountaintop, metaphorically at least, I am wealthy, or I am healthy, or whatever it is.
I have another thought for
Even
you.
if it's like a fake feeling where you don't
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah, fake it till you make it. But here's another technique you might try, because we don't know how your brain is going to interpret that. And right now it's interpreting it negatively because you're saying it about I. So a new technique would be, I am wealthy. You write that 10 times. Then you say, you are wealthy. Like I'm telling you, you are wealthy. And then the third way is, she is wealthy. So we get the I, the you, and the she. And one of those ways, the brain will believe more so than the other way.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And another couple ways is to get you have to get it to the subconscious, remember.
Right.
Because the conscious is the one telling you, no, you're not.
Right.
Okay? So you have to get past that to the subconscious to have the impact, and the emotions help you get past that. And another way to do it would be, you could record yourself, or have any recording, but some recording while you're sleeping, recording saying those affirmations over and over. And it could be to where you can barely hear it and just under. You don't need to be hearing it. It's just playing, and your subconscious is picking it up when your conscious is asleep. Or you could work on meditation and getting to the point of alpha waves. So beta waves is monkey mind. I got to do this, this, and this today. You want to get down to alpha waves, maybe gamma waves, depending on certain goals, but essentially being able to be there and be present without thinking.
Right.
And Janelle, that's one thing too that would help you get to acceptance and forgiveness, is essentially, we're talking about scientifically alpha waves in the brain. We could measure it on EEG, but it's happened in prayer and meditation for eons.
Right.
That's what they're doing. So we're accessing the subconscious mind, getting that monkey brain out of the way. And Janelle had mentioned, Jesus and the Bible earlier, and I just want to drop another nugget. A sermon I listened to a couple of weeks ago, the pastor was saying Satan's only tool against us is distraction. Satan can't do anything to us but distract us. And that's all he needs to do for us to not reach our potential, right? So if we're distracted by the boss 4 years ago or whatever it is, I'm not in the now. I'm letting my past run my future, okay?
Right.
And I'm, excuse me, I'm not in the now, and I'm going to get 4 years further and look back and say, holy crap, it's been 8 years and I'm still distracted by this guy and he forgot I ever even existed.
Right,
The
right.
week after he fired me. So it's distraction, whatever, whatever the cause, distraction is what we want to avoid. And the whole thing about being in the now is intentionally, this is the moment, and controlling our thoughts and minds and emotions on what we want to be on, not letting all this stuff control us.
Don't give it your energy.
Yes. Yes.
So easier said than done.
I know.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, there's a ton of techniques out there. The other thing you might do is Google subliminal positive affirmations, because a lot of companies put those together. And
Yeah,
you're not even
to the
hearing
Joe
it.
Dispenza meditations. That's what I've been doing when I meditate. He's good.
Yeah.
I like him. His voice isn't, he's good, but his voice is not one of those highly polished. So you have to get used to that too, but it's good. Subliminal.
Yeah, those, because you're not actually hearing it, but your subconscious is hearing it, which is what you want. Your conscious isn't hearing it, your subconscious is hearing it.
Yeah, it has been cool to have like immediately just start thinking if I wake up in the night, like I trust you, I trust you, I trust you, God, like just saying that over and over, and I'm like, I'll immediately go back to sleep. It's really amazing. Or I thank you, I thank you, I thank you. It just like redirects my mind to the positive, and I don't even I just, cut that off, the negative path, I guess, and just like immediately go down the positive. But I also was thinking the other night, because I struggle with all of this COVID stuff and all that's going on in the country, and I have struggled to forgive the people that I feel like are doing a lot of harm. But then the other night, I really had a lot of victory, because I was thinking about how Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And so I just started saying that over and over in my mind. And it was amazing how it did let me let go. But then it also reminded me of how much God has forgiven me. And all of a sudden I was like, whoa, I'm the one, who's, I'm a sinner too. And it was really good to get to a deeper place of realizing how much I've been forgiven, and how, like that parable of the guy who is forgiven a huge debt, but then he goes out and finds somebody else who owes him, and he is wringing his neck, pay me what you owe, So I think one thing for me is, the more I can realize how much I've been forgiven, how much God has forgiven me, and others too. My husband, my family, will help me let go of other people's stuff.
Oh, you can't, and the sensitive person really takes on not only their own stuff, but even a comment made by someone else that's not meant to be hurtful. You take it as hurtful, and then you're ruminating about it and replaying it. And the person that said it didn't mean to hurt you. They just said what came to mind.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's kind of like, how should I take this?
Right. And when you're sensitive, you're the person, as I'm looking at my screen, the person on the right here, not happy, but the other one.
Yeah. So this is good vocalization, good work. And again, this isn't something that will be fixed tonight or even fixed in 3 months, but it's that consistency is the only magic bullet, right? So just like you might have a nutritional practice or a prayer practice or a meditation practice, if I eat an apple over a donut once, I'm not losing weight, I'm not getting healthier, right? I have to choose apple over donut every morning.
Right.
If I meditate once, it was really, in my mind, it might be worse than if I never did it, because I sat there like struggling to be still and try and be quiet, and got up and was like, well, I just lost 15 minutes when I could have done XYZ, right? So
Right.
you have to commit to the practice and then, you know, actually do it. And again, I could go meditate and get no better over time because I'm doing it because I think I should do it, not because I'm intentional in the meditation while I'm there, right? Just like I could read the Bible to check it off my daily list, but if I'm not intentionally reading, I might as well have not read it, right? It's just, hey, I've read this 100 times. What am I getting out of that? So it's the intention behind what we're doing, and then the commitment to the practice, whatever that practice is. If I want to be the best doctor I can be, or mom I can be, or accountant I can be, I have to put intention in that every single day. So
Well, yeah, I was going to say there's a neat way to look at it is you set your intention for the day and then you put your attention on your intention.
absolutely. Absolutely. Because if you don't, then you default to your auto list, right? So you default to the I'm unworthy, I'm not wealthy, I'm whatever it is. You're letting your past create your future.
Right.
So we have to intentionally be here now to intentionally create what we want. Otherwise, you default to autopilot.
To the ruts.
That's right. You fall in the ruts.